we need to understand. The majority of Republicans, as well as the majority of Democrats, not as big a majority, but a majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. Where's the will of the people in all this? Want an improved Medicare for all, which would include eyeglasses, which would include hearing aids, which would include dental, and which would include mental health. By the way, everything I'm talking to you about here is considered a moderate position in every other advanced democracy. Next, we have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. 68,000 Americans who die every year from lack of health care. We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give them. We have 75 to 90 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. You know, underinsurance is a big deal in this country. People who, yeah, their coverage will let them go to the doctor, but the coverage doesn't cover the test that the doctor wants you to have, or the operation that the doctor says that you need, or of course, as I said, the prescription drug that the doctor has prescribed you. I've talked to doctors who said, I don't know why I even bother to practice medicine anymore. One said to me, it used to be 20 years ago, 15 years ago, if I prescribed a treatment, the question would be, what are the side effects? Today, it's how much does it cost? Because the person came to the doctor knowing all I can afford is the visit. Right? We have 1.3 million Americans who ration their insulin. This doesn't happen in any other advanced democracy. And let me tell you something, when you're talking about other advanced countries that have universal health care, it's not even just the democracies. Every advanced country has universal health care. They don't have people rationing their insulin. I was speaking last year to a group in England, and when I talked about rationing insulin, I could tell that people just looked at me like they literally couldn't even imagine it. But that's because of the institutionalized greed of pharmaceutical companies. I already talked to you about the dangers of the institutionalized greed of big food, big agriculture, what it's done to our farming sector, what it's done to our farming, the institutionalized greed of chemical companies, the chemicals that are in pesticides, that our children's developing brains are exposed to, and that we know harm a child's developing brain. And this, of course, has to do with the fact that we have guns that are just flooding our streets because of the institutionalized greed of gun manufacturers, and this is another one. And I think a surprising one. The majority of Republicans, not as big a majority, but a majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want common sense gun safety laws, and that includes gun owners. This is not about the Second Amendment. This is about the institutionalized greed of the gun manufacturers. Also, the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats, once again, not as big a majority, but a majority, want tuition-free college and tech school, once again, which they have in every other advanced democracy. We have been trained to expect too little. We have been trained to expect too little. And now our young people, you know, they're looking at people, kids their age, in other countries. They have universal health care. They have tuition-free college and tech school, which we had in this country until the 1970s. There was a situation at University of Florida, University of Texas, University of California. I want to say something to you, youngins, a few youngins here, and the people who are not youngins, like me, are going to nod their head because you need to know that this is true, okay? I'm going to describe a land long ago, far away. It's going to sound like a fairy tale to you. And you might intellectually know it's true, but still it's going to sound like a fairy tale to you. Are you ready?
Yes.
The name of the book is The 1970s. The average American couple could afford a house. The average American couple could afford a car. The average American couple could afford a yearly vacation. The average American couple could afford, if they wanted to, for one parent to stay home and for, if they wanted to. And the average American couple, one salary could support a family of 4, and that one average American couple could afford to send their kids to college. That was called a thriving middle class. So you can finish with the overlords, the fact that we keep ramping up rather than ramping down fossil fuel extraction, even though we know that we absolutely must start ramping it down. We're talking about that future habitability of the species on this planet here, but all the modern presidents, whether they're Republican or Democrat, fall in line with big oil. And the same is true with our defense budget, which is now going to be, theoretically, from what they say, something like $1.5 trillion next year, even though we were already at a point where everybody was just apoplectic over the fact that it was over $800 billion already this year. So we're at a point where so much money has been transferred, so much wealth, to the tune of $50 trillion over the last 50 years. So much wealth has been transferred from the hands of the bottom 90% of Americans that it has completely collapsed our middle class. We now have 39% of Americans who say that they regularly skip meals in order to pay their rent. In the poorer neighborhoods of the United States, and we have way too many of those, there are people, millions of people now, regularly, who sell their blood plasma in order to pay their rent. We have 70% of Americans, as I said to you before, who say that they live with chronic economic anxiety and tension. A majority of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, a majority of Americans who cannot afford a $1,000 unexpected expenditure. Meanwhile, you have these tens of millions of kids, not just kids, by the way, who are living with these college loan debts, which, first of all, I want to ask those of you who are not young to please join with me, any of you who are not young like me, okay? Would you take a moment, please, and think of who you were in your 20s, okay? Could the person who you were in your 20s have been able to handle tens of thousands of dollars of college loan debt? Would you be who you are today? Debt is crippling. Debt is crippling at any age. But for people in their 20s are hard. 20s are hard for every generation. It's not a mental illness, by the way. You do need to know that. It's not a mental illness, but it's hard. And to load onto that tens of thousands of dollars of college loan debt, which they only got because they're trying to better their lives. You know, pursue happiness. I thought that was the whole point. That's why we should use the Higher Education Act to cancel these college loan debts, because it's immoral. They should never have occurred. In every other advanced democracy, they have tuition-free college and tech school. Anytime somebody gets a higher education, on average, they will make more money. That means you'll have a higher tax base. It expands your economy. It expands your economy when more people are educated. It expands your economy when more people are given the opportunity to actualize their dreams. People want to be creative. If you go into a Montessori school, you see how little kids want to create, little kids want to produce. Guess what? So do big kids. So do adults. We want to, but people are chained by invisible economic shackles in this society. Not 20% of us. 20% of us, the economy's doing fine. And I think that's to be celebrated. But to say that your economy is doing fine for 20% of Americans, that's like saying all the blood is circulating in one arm. Your blood has to circulate in your body, and financial opportunity has to circulate in your society. Because otherwise you don't have a middle class, and you cannot have a thriving democracy if you do not have a thriving middle class. Systems don't want to hear that. Because those corporate forces own the U.S. government. Laura was talking about the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which I think will one day be seen as one of the worst ever handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court, giving unlimited permission to these huge corporate behemoths to influence our politics in such a way that our leaders over and over again do more with their decisions to serve the profit-making goals of their donors than to serve the goal of safety, health, well-being, peace, and prosperity of their own constituents, even when their own constituents is well articulated. Now, that system so owns Washington for that reason that Washington has become a system of legalized bribery. Now, I'm talking to you from the belly of the beast. There is, as I said earlier, a political media industrial complex. Ever since the Telecommunications Act in 1996, a few corporations own the media. And what you have, quite simply, I'm going to lay it out for you. Just like Fox News does pretty much what the Republican Party wants, CNN and MSNBC pretty much do what the Democratic Party wants. And I can tell you, as someone who has lived at the effect of this, it is unbelievable. And I used to think that too often the political parties chopped wood and carried water for these corporate forces, and now I realize it's worse than that. They are corporate forces. Now, George Washington said in his farewell address that he feared that political parties would become of great risk to our democracy because he feared they would form factions of men who were more loyal to their party than to their country. John Adams, our second president, said he also saw them as the greatest threat to democracy. Now, I think of myself as a Roosevelt Democrat. Laura was talking about President Roosevelt, because I was brought up to believe in the traditional pillars of the Democratic Party. And that has to do with the idea that the purpose of government is to help people thrive. The purpose of government should not be to help huge corporations make more money. The purpose of government should be to help people thrive. Now, the Republican Party, for the most part, has been really almost taken over by the corporatist mentality. The Democratic Party is sort of trying to have it both ways. There's the corporatist element, and then there's trying to make it better for people. But once again, as Laura was talking about Eleanor Roosevelt and Franklin, Eleanor said to Franklin Roosevelt, it's not enough to ameliorate stress. We need fundamental economic reform. If all you're doing is trying to help people, it's this incremental change. So one political party is running straight to the iceberg, the other one is moving there more slowly and would hit it at a different angle. If you say, however, we need fundamental economic reform, to me, what you are doing is that you are expressing the sentiments of Abraham Lincoln. With the battle at Gettysburg, that was the decisive battle in the in the Civil Rights, in the Civil War. It was the decisive battle in the Civil War that determined that the North would in fact win and the Union would be kept. Lincoln went to the Battle of Gettysburg, and in the Gettysburg Address he said, the men who died here, men who died for the Union, he said, had given their last full measure of devotion so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. Everything I've been saying to you tonight is really to suggest it's perishing now. We are not currently functioning as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We're functioning as a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. And I submit to you, we need as fundamental course correction in our time as other generations have risen up in order to effectuate in theirs. And we can do this. We can do things such as an economic bill of rights, where we have tuition-free college and tech school, where we have paid family leave, where we have universal health care, where we have a guaranteed sick pay, where we have a complete eradication of the college loan debt to let those people get back into the game. Some young, older gentleman said to me once, you know, Marianne, the problem with the young people in America today is that they don't respect capitalism. And I remember I said to him, I said, well, maybe if they had some capital, let them into the game, that's all they want, but they don't have the discretionary funding in order to start their website or whatever. You know, I'm of a generation, and I'm not the only one here. We didn't have anything in our 20s, but it was like you didn't have to. You figured you would someday, you know, because the system, you knew that you were sort of supported, but you weren't even thinking of it that way, but you weren't worried. And to see the constriction that so many young people go through now, especially when they end up with such intense college loan debt, that they end up working in another field where they feel they'll be able to get rid of the loans faster, and then they're wondering, why did I even bother to get them? And then we wonder why people are depressed. We wonder where all this mental health crisis comes from. But at the same time, you know, we have to remember the people who walked across the bridge at Selma were traumatized. You know, we have to toughen up as a generation. We have to respond to this moment. We could have that economic bill of rights. We could have a Department of Peace. We could have a peace academy as well as a military academy. We could have armies of peace builders as well as armies of military personnel. We could be playing peace games, not just war games. We could be mature enough to realize JFK was right. If mankind doesn't end war, war is going to end mankind. We've got to get serious about this. We have to proactively begin to prevent war. And that's what Franklin Roosevelt said. He said we need to do more than end war. We need to end the beginnings of all wars. We need to proactively create peace, just like we need to proactively create health. We do need a Medicare for all, but we also need issues, what mine is called a whole health plan, in order to proactively create peace. That has to do with dealing with your environmental policies, dealing with your chemical policies, dealing with your food policies, and more. We could have an end to America's drug war, which is needed. Richard Nixon started the drug war in 1971. He said that it was America's public enemy number one, drugs. But he didn't mean that. That's been made clear. He did it for political reasons, and in large part to attack black neighborhoods. And we've spent $1 trillion. It hasn't solved the drug problem in America. It's only gotten worse and worse and worse. We still spend $100 billion a year on the drug war. We, for that, could be spending that money on a world-class network of recovery options. Most addicts want to get sober. We don't need a drug czar. We need a recovery czar. We should be treating drug addiction, which is a huge problem in this country, but we should be treating it the way countries like Portugal do, as a health issue, not as a criminal issue. As it is now, when I was in college, 300,000 people were in prison in the United States. Today, there are over 2.3 million. And 46% of all of our federal prisoners are there for nonviolent drug offenders. So this is feeding your prison industrial complex. Plus there's a terrible racial element here, guys. Terrible racial element. Black people in America use drugs roughly the same rate as white people. But you don't see police raiding white neighborhoods to see who's doing drugs here. Not only that, we know that in our criminal justice system, the way it works today, a black person is likely to get a 20% average longer sentence if convicted than does a white person. So that's where a lot of your black and brown population in your prison system is, which is only feeding this whole issue of family breakdown, etc. So not only would that help break down the prison industrial complex, it would also help us at the southern border. Because one of the main categories, which is feeding this mass migration from Latin America, has to do with people who are trying to escape the horrifying violence of the drug cartels. We will undercut the drug cartels if we decriminalize in a safe and healthy and wise manner and responsible manner. This will actually cut the black market that the drug cartels actually thrive on, and actually it will help us with the drugs that we do have to be very, very serious about, and that has to do with fentanyl. So whether it's moving from a just transition from a war economy to a peace economy, whether it has to do with a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy, all of these things are things that could be done. We have the people in this country with solutions. The problem is the solutions are over here and the people with power over here. And the people with solutions don't have the power. And the people with power too often don't really want to hear from the people with solutions, because the solutions, even though they might, save the species, don't necessarily provide short-term profits for huge corporate entities. So it's not like we're hopeless because we can't change. We have the geniuses in this country. We have the best practices in this country. I'm sure that's as true in Kentucky as in any other state. I see it everywhere. I see it in your faces. I see, nobody's on your phone. People are listening. People are real. People say, well, Americans are apathetic. I don't think Americans are apathetic. I think people can't believe what it's gotten to. I think people are like, well, I can't believe this. And I see this on the left and I see this on the right. We need to get out of this idea that it's all left versus right, because it's not. It's up versus down. It's power versus powerlessness. It's people who have access to capital and more access to capital versus those just struggling to survive. And unfortunately, those with enough access to capital, like I'm here. They're like, why is she here? Didn't Biden already win the nomination? Yes, I'm not delusional, I understand that. Biden has already won the nomination. The issue is, first of all, if anybody in this room happens to be anyone who has donated to my campaign, you bought this ballot. Yeah. You bought it. We're going to use it. That's how I feel. The system is so rigged. The system is so rigged. The system is so rigged so that only those with access to humongous amounts of capital are able to get anywhere near the pinnacles of power in this country. I'm telling you as someone who has been through it. So this is the deal. I'm not asking for your vote because I could become the Democratic nominee. That has already been accomplished by the president. But with every vote we get, we have more capacity to inconvenience some people who really need to be inconvenienced in this country. We have more and more capacity to make the message of this campaign that we need fundamental economic reform, that defense contractors should not have such undue influence on our foreign policy, that big oil should not have such undue influence on our energy policies, that insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies should not have so much to do with our health, that big food should not have so much to do with the health of the food we feed our children, and on and on and on. One president can't fix this, but a president who talked about this for real would be a real service to the United States. And even though in this particular confluence that will not be me, that doesn't matter. Everything we do that gets us closer is creating more and more of a space that we will get there. We are planting seeds. So you are voting if you are a registered Democrat. It's too late to become a Democrat if you're not. But if you are a registered Democrat and you vote for me on May 21st, and may I have that flyer, please? On May 21st, and I think your early voting is what? The 12th for the 8th. I have that information somewhere where your early, does anybody know where early voting is? When it is? If you bring me my purse, I have a actually. Okay, this Thursday night, April 25th. Yeah, this Thursday night, April 25th, which is tomorrow, right? At 7 p.m. There is a meeting on Zoom. And if you bring me my purse, please. Somebody has it. Okay. Yeah, because I have it on my phone when your early voting is. The way it is, we have, so far in this primary season, we have gotten 400,000 votes. Now, 400,000 votes is tiny if you're trying to get the nomination. But if it's a close election in November, 400,000 votes is a lot. I believe, this is my opinion, that we're not going to win, for those of you who are Democrats, and now I'm talking to those of you who are Democrats, I don't believe that the big danger to a Democrat in 2024 is Donald Trump. People who vote for Donald Trump are going to vote for Donald Trump. It's a free country and they have that right. I think the electoral risk to the Democrats in 2024 is people staying home. People staying home, and also people have options. I think this Bobby Kennedy campaign, people are disgusted. I think the people, the political elite in this country really need to get out more. I don't think that this race is much like 2020. I think it's more like 2016. People who are part of the political elite in this country, they're in New York and LA and Washington and Sun Valley, here for poor season, but they're not out in the country. And I see something very similar to what I saw in 2016. I was as horrified by the election of Trump as everyone I knew, but I was not shocked like everyone I knew. Because there was a rumbling underneath the surface of things. It is rumbling now. And my concern is that it's going to blow. There's too much tension, it's going to blow one direction or the other. And we have to take control here. We must be a responsible generation. That energy is going to fall in one direction or the other. It's either going to fall in the direction of greater hope, greater possibility, greater democracy, what Lincoln called the rebirth of freedom, new birth of freedom, right? Or it's going to fall in the direction of chaos, possible violence, authoritarianism. I mean, look at the stuff that's happening. Look what's happening right now. We're like this right now, and everybody can feel it. hope is born of participation and hopeful solutions. If we are able to do this, if we get, with every state that I'm still on the ballot. So here it's May 21st, my daughter's birthday, and I'm gonna be able to tell you in a minute what your early voting days are. Every vote I get, once again, I'm not gonna be winning Kentucky among the Democrats, but with every vote I get, there's a greater chance that I could have a voice at the convention, because this is the deal. I believe, for those of you who are Democrats, so those of you who are caring about this, I don't believe that we're gonna win in 2024 by scaring people. Be very, very scared. And I can't imagine how we're gonna win by telling people, that the economy is doing well. When for so many Americans, when you have Americans who are having to sell their blood plasma, the way we're gonna win in 2024 is by giving people something to vote for. We're gonna win in 2024 by giving people something that will help them materially improve their lives. Like saying we're gonna have universal health care. Like saying we're gonna have tuition-free college and tech school. By actually saying there's going to be a guaranteed living wage. Okay, so listen everybody, your early voting is May 16th to May 18th. Uncommitted is on the ballot. For those of you who might be thinking, is there anybody who's thinking you might be voting uncommitted? I would submit to you that a woman who could call a Bibi Netanyahu and say no can do a whole lot more than a hashtag can. And if you vote for all that uncommitted is doing, it's still giving delegates to the president. So it has this veneer of something really radical, but it's actually very much playing their game. I do believe that it was an important show of democracy in Michigan, because Michigan has a large Muslim population, Arab population, Palestinian American, so I had a lot of respect for it there. I stood back, that's why I hadn't even recommitted at that point. However, that's what I would hope to be able to convince you that the choice to vote for a woman who could actually get up there and say something that could possibly make a difference is a lot more in the hands of a human being. Okay, so for those of you who are interested, that's the thing. We have 400,000 votes. If you believe that the corporations that control this country should not. It's really as simple as that. That we should be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I have seen in this campaign, I'm a big girl. I can, I have a life, I can be fine. But what they did to me is not cool. For sure. Not cool, and you should know. They're talking right now all the stuff into the Trump trial about how the Inquirer planted stories. Oh, how horrible. Well, I don't see where that's any different than MSNBC and CNN not covering me at all. When I was running for president last time, I was on CNN fairly often. I was on MSNBC fairly often. I had a CNN town hall. Why is that important? Because particularly if you're a Democrat, the traditional Democrat, if they never see you on CNN or MSNBC, they don't even think you exist. Now, if you are an FEC registered qualified candidate for president, the American people should know you. The American people should know your agenda. Traditionally, the role of the political party was to stand in the background. And then the people decided who you wanted to nominate, and then the party stepped forward. But over the last few years, the party doesn't even pretend anymore. They said in court they didn't have to, and now they said from the beginning, there will be no primary. We have an incumbent, and we don't primary an incumbent. Well, a few of us are old enough to remember Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson was an incumbent president, and Eugene McCarthy primaried him. And it was important that he did. It was important that Bobby Kennedy Sr. did, because that started the entire conversation about ending the Vietnam War. There is no special assignation in the U.S. Constitution given to incumbency. People primary, you've had it here in Kentucky, people primary sitting incumbent senators. People primary sitting incumbent congresspeople. We're just told these things. And I was horrified this year by how so many traditional Democrats, it's like this codependent relationship with the DNC. It's going to be Joe, it's going to be Joe, it's going to be Joe. And I was like, well, shouldn't we have a discussion? Shouldn't the voters, and as far as qualified is concerned, be very clear. In the US Constitution, it says that in order to be qualified to be president, you have to have been born here, you have to have lived here for 14 years, and you have to be 35 years old or older. Now, in this, as in many things in the Constitution, it's not only what the founders said, but equally as significant in many cases what they chose not to say. They didn't say the president had to have been a governor, had to have been a senator, had to have been a congressman. They were leaving it up to every generation to determine for itself. What do you think is the skill set and the expertise most required in order to face the challenges of this time? I would submit to you, and I know the system has a hard time with a confident woman, but I submit to you, my life experience and my professional experience, I think actually makes me more qualified. Dick Cheney was plenty qualified and a million they think they have the right to curate these elections. They think they have the right. So then you get to think, oh, you have a choice. Even though 70% of Democrats said we want to hear other options. But the DNC said, and I believe candidate suppression is a form of voter suppression. Like I said, I'll be okay, but you need to know that. So what we have here was a situation where, for instance, when my poll numbers were the same as Nikki Haley's, hers was called a surge, mine was ignored. And Vivek Ramaswamy and Chris Christie both had CNN town halls, and they were polling far less than I. But I'm considered dangerous. Dangerous to them. Why? Because their idea of qualified is qualified to perpetuate the system as it is. And then they'll say, well, she has no political experience. Well, I have two things to say to that. First of all, they never argued that about Vivek Ramaswamy. They never argued that about Andrew Yang. They never argued that about even Bobby Kennedy. Nobody says that part. But even more than that, I would submit to you that people who have been in that system too long, it should be considered a disqualifier at this point. What we need is fundamental change. And somebody who can discern what's really going on, and that is what I submit to you, is what my skill set is. I've been around long enough to see when a system is sick. And I've had enough professional experience to know how to articulate the sickness. And I have enough professional experience, and yes, you know, they act like, oh, you have to have been there to know. No, you don't. No, you don't. And I actually, without speaking out of school, I've been in those rooms. At the highest level, and you know what? They're just people like us, doing their best, but talking like we are. They create this image of like the Wizard of Oz. We don't need another Wizard of Oz. We need to tear down the curtain, right? So they would say that only someone who's had a career entrenched in driving the car that leads this government into this ditch where we now are should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of it. We don't need another political car mechanic. Washington has plenty of those. The problem is we're on the wrong road. And so, you know, we don't need another technocrat, we need a visionary. And I'm not the greatest visionary in the United States, but I'm the only one who's been running for Democratic nomination for president of the United States. And so I believe what Franklin Roosevelt said. He said that the main job of the presidency is not administrative. He said it's moral leadership, and that's what we need. Someone to ask, is it moral that we're withholding health care from people just so that insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies make more money? Is it moral that our children are exposed to carcinogens in their food just so the big food companies make more money? Is it moral what we are doing, ramping up fossil fuel extraction, when scientists have made it so clear that for the young ones among us here, this could mean the whole swaths of continents are not habitable at about the time that you're coming into your best years? Is it moral that we've had situations in our lifetime where we have fought wars, where hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people have died for no other reason in retrospect, but so that Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Boy could make more money? Is that moral? It's an amoral system. It is unfettered from any ethical or soulful consideration. And they say that religious and spiritual issues should stay out of politics. And I would like to inform to make clear, and I'm not telling you anything tonight you don't already know. I might have thrown out some statistics, but we know these things. If you look at the history of the United States and the history of the great social justice movements, at the very beginning, among abolitionists, there were black abolitionists and white abolitionists. Among white abolitionists, the whole movement emerged from the early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. Among the women's suffragists, most of the leaders were religious Quakers. And let's not forget that Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. Those of us who are speaking from the moral place of this is wrong, this is right, and this is wrong, and saying that the way to expand an economy is to help people thrive, and that an economic system should serve the people should not serve an economic system. I think people grounded in that kind of perspective are not the ones who should be staying out of the game, stay in your lane. There isn't even supposed to be a lane in America, and certainly not a lane of political elite who are doing little more than serving the very corporate matrix that is truly, as Lincoln would say, a form of tyranny and injustice. So, I don't know if it's possible that I could get 15% in Kentucky, but I know that if it's possible at all, it will be because you help. And at this point, if for those of you who are interested, it's simply a matter of talking to people, sharing with people the videos that are on our website and so forth, on my social media. Would love to have you come to the Zoom meeting tomorrow night, 7 p.m. with a very special guest. I wonder, is that me? I hope it's me. A very special guest with me, but I will be back in Washington, D.C., and would love it. All of you will be given one of these. We can't afford to be hopeless. I know, particularly I know now, because I've been there, I am there. I know the system is locked up. But I look at the abolitionists, slavery was locked up too, and they unlocked it. And, institutionalized suppression of women was locked up too, they unlocked it. Segregation was locked too, and they unlocked it, and it's our time. And I share with you tonight my faith in who we are. And I see in this room, I have not been in one room anywhere in this country where I've left the room thinking, oh, these people just don't have what it takes. I haven't seen a lack of interest or concern. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything I said, in fact, anyone else does. But I saw in this room adults. And that's really what's happening here. We will not be able to rise to the challenge of this moment if men are acting like little boys and women are acting like little girls. But I think we're ready. And I have seen in those very difficult moments that I've experienced with so many people, that even the most distracted life changes immediately when they get the bad news. Oscar Wilde has a line about someone who said, he lives a deeply shallow life. I've seen even people who live a deeply shallow life, when the doctor says the test results came back and it's cancer, within 5 minutes, so many ultimately unimportant things just fall away. That person leans into the doctor and says, what do we do? And that's where we need to be now. What do we do? What do we do? And if we live in the question, the answers will come. The reason we haven't had deep answers is because we haven't been asking deep questions. And we have been led to believe other people would handle that. Mahatma Gandhi was asked, who's the leader of the Indian independence movement? He said the small, still voice within. So, as Martin Luther King said, we need quantitative changes in our circumstances and qualitative shifts in our souls. He said that the desegregation of the American South was the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights movement, but that the ultimate goal was the establishment of the beloved community. So in order to move, we're 21st century people now. The 20th century was very mechanistic. You just want to change things, you tweak the pieces of the machine. This is the 21st. You don't just look at symptoms, you look at root causes. Far more holistic, whole person. So we have to address not only what we need to do, but who we need to be. So I have a particular little personal formula that works for me. So I'll leave it with you, just in case it works for you. You pray in the morning and you kick ass in the afternoon. Now, would you like to do a little Q&A where you ask whatever you want to ask and bring up whatever you want? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you. That's the first thing. First of all, I have to say I've been a fan of yours forever.
Thank
Read
you.
everything you've written. You brought me into being a student in Course of Miracle over
Thank
20
you.
years ago. But everything you've said tonight, and I need everybody to hear this. I am a grandmother. So I have children who are struggling. And we didn't used to have to do that.
That's right.
My grandchildren, we didn't have no health insurance.
That's
They
right.
ended up having to work 2 and 3 jobs and 4, and I'm watching my children who've gone to school and done all the right
They
things.
did everything right.
Okay, so as a grandmother, what can I do to help my children and everybody else's children? Well, I went back to school. I'm 75 years old. I went back to school because I could on free tuition for us older people. I am in school at the University of Louisville, and I have taken a course. It was originally supposed to be a full degree. You'll be interested. It's called Peace, Justice, and Conflict Transformation.
Fabulous.
Originated in Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. They connected with U of L. So at first I was going to get the degree, and then later it said, well, it's been smoothed down a little bit, and maybe you can get a certificate or a minor. Everything that you have said tonight is everything that I have been studying this entire semester. And the professor who connects with the professor in Georgetown, they're concerned because there's pressure to hide it, to get rid of it. Everything that she has said, I have studied and, my ass off. I've never read so much, but I've never been so educated on all the ugliness by the big corporations that pretty much officially, I've heard that they officially own the United States.
Well, they unofficially own the United States, but they in effect own the United States because of the reasons that I said. These corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money. And that's, here we have this little and this is a large part of how it works. So they had millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Tens of, it'll be billions of dollars by the end.
It's so sick. It's so
It is so sick. It is so
The
sick.
new Jim Crow is the drug war, mass incarceration of young black men. I saw an actual chart of all of the prisons that are being built now around the world, the percentages. The United States is way
more than anyone
up
else.
here, and everybody else
Way
is way down here.
Remember when we were younger and politicians used to say, peace and prosperity? They never even say it anymore. They don't even pretend that what they're after is peace and prosperity, because then if they said it, people would say, well, then why are we doing this or that if we're going after peace and prosperity?
I found that there's a lot of communities and small groups that are quietly rising together, not just in the United States, but majorly in the United States, but also around the world, to get something to support what you're doing.
Well, it's like what I was saying before, the people aren't the problem. I think we have way enough, and that's why I've said repeatedly here, people on the left as well as on the right. A lot of Trump supporters were on the UAW picket line. But the official resistance, and so like in my case, being invisibilized, erased, I'm sure you saw major media that said the president had no opponent, and you might have tilted your head and went, wait, I thought Marianne Williamson was running, right? So we can't leave electoral politics out of our formulation for how to transform this. It's not the ultimate answer. The ultimate answer is everything we do, inside and outside electoral politics, but you can't leave it out. And that's why in this election you say, what can I do? Well, for the next couple of weeks you can do this. You do whatever is in front of you. And like I said, every vote that I get, every campaign, so there's Kentucky's left, Guam, Virgin Islands, Oregon, New Mexico, Washington DC, Maryland, Puerto Rico, Idaho. So just, you know, that few thousand here, a few thousand there, it all adds up. And they work so hard to make sure you're not even heard, but every vote you get is more of a raised eyebrow. This thing you were just talking about parents, it's not only that the young people can't afford to get started the way we could afford to get started. It's that so many parents have said to me, I wasn't planning on having to help support my kids. I have a pension, I have a retirement, I had just enough savings to support me. So it's not only an economic crisis for the young people, it's an economic crisis for the older people as well. This is the richest country in the world. You turn on television and they're telling you the economy is so good. Yeah, the economy is so good for the people who advertise on that program. I heard this man. He's the CEO of Kellogg. And I just happened to flip on one day, it was I think CNBC or one of those. And he said, well, you know, we have to meet people where they are. I guess that was a PR line that some highly paid consultant gave him. Have to meet people where they are. So as long as so many American families are now serving breakfast cereal to their families at dinner, we just want them to know that Kellogg's has some great choices.
Yeah.
So I immediately Googled his salary, over $4 million a year. And I thought to myself, well, what would a sane society look like? Because, you know, Gandhi said the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. So I said to myself, what would a sane society look like? And this is what a sane society would look like. I am the CEO of Kellogg, he would say, and I have joined with 4 or 5 other CEOs of major food companies in the United States. We are aware that hunger is rising in this country. So we would like to announce today that for the next year, all of us together will make sure that there are no empty shelves in any food pantry in the United States. That would be ethically based capitalism, and you know what? I think they'd all make more money. Because if I heard that, I'd rush to go buy one of their products just to be in support.
All that good stuff that's healthy for your children.
Pardon?
And all the good stuff that's healthy for your children.
Well, that's a problem too, in all the ingredients of those products. But you know, there are people such as him, not that gentleman, but people like him who have said to me, Marianne, if I did what you said, I would be fired by my board of directors. That's why you need a government. That's why you need government regulation. When I was a kid, the FDA had teeth, the Food and Drug Administration. When I was a kid, they'd walk into a grocery store, something's carcinogenic, get that off the shelves. Now, because of the influence, it's called corporate capture of these agencies, the most they can do is write a letter to the CEO. Please, sir, please consider. We would kindly, respectfully ask that you consider that children are dying of cancer. Yes.
First, I was going to say thank you for continuing this fight.
Thank you.
And I'm a longtime student of yours.
Thank you.
Debbie Bernstein. And I went to the Clinton Gore rally when I was their age in '92 with my parents. And I was raised in a very political activist home. George Bush came to my high school here in Kentucky in 2001, and I protested and I refused. I decided to do work instead and sat in the gym and would not go to get out of school like the rest of those kids. And I've been so disenfranchised by the political system. This is not politics as I know it. And I have leaned into A Course in Miracles and the study of love and turning to love and focusing on what I can build. But how do you stay? So how do you keep your principles so true to your heart while fighting such a it's such a hard environment to keep your foundational belief of love when you see all this, toxicity around you. I've pulled away, and I wanted to bring them tonight.
Beautiful family.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful family.
But this is the only political environment I would like to bring them into is here. So thank you for doing this.
Thank Thank you, thank you. Have you read my books, Healing the Soul of America and The Politics of Love?
No, I haven't.
You might like them because they are about the intersection of spirituality and politics. It wasn't easy for the abolitionists either. It wasn't easy for the women suffragists. It wasn't easy for the early labor organizers. It wasn't easy for the civil rights workers. But they took care of one another. We've got to get out of the habit of, are you okay? What trauma are you dealing with now? You know, we need to get in the habit of saying, what great things are you doing? And how can I help?